The 2025 Monaco Grand Prix was awful. The FIA introduced a mandatory two stops in the hopes that it would, quote, improve the racing spectacle. Did this work? No. No, it did not. So let's talk a little bit about why it didn't work and what can be done to make Monaco more exciting. Now I want to start by saying that I do completely understand why Formula 1 are trying to spice up the Monaco Grand Prix. It's never been the most exciting event on a Sunday. And while I do enjoy Monaco for what it is, I can completely understand why some people don't. But I have no idea who thought this two-stop was going to change anything. I said this in a video before the race. At best, all we were going to get is more cars being undercut, which is pretty boring, or overcut, same thing. And maybe something happened to the pit stops like what happened to Bottas a few years ago when his tyre just didn't come off. But to me, that's not what Grand Prix racing should be. I don't want cars to be undercut. I want cars to be overtaking on the circuit, not in the pit stops. And at the very worst, we got exactly what we saw this weekend. A race that saw only 2 overtakes in the entire 78 laps. The first overtake that we saw was Kimi Antonelli on Gabriel Bortoleto, which we kind of can't even call an overtake. It was more of a shoving him into the wall. And the second was on the final lap of the race when Lance Stroll went around the outside of Nico Hülkenberg, I think it was, at the Nouvelle chicane. So you can see why a lot of Formula 1 fans were quite disappointed. You've then got drivers like George Russell, who are more happy to take a penalty than get stuck in traffic. So it's clear that this is not the racing that Formula 1 fans want to see. When we normally race at Monaco, we do tend to get the leaders sort of back in the pack up a bit, and sometimes you do see that in the midfield too, drivers trying to create a big gap for themselves. But what we saw this weekend, where the teammates were backing up the whole pack for themselves to get their teammates into clean air so they can pit, was kind of crazy. The Williams and the Racing Bulls teams were both playing this game very well. And while it's not the racing I want to see, I can completely understand why they did what they did. When both of their cars were starting in the top 10, if they made no mistakes, they were going to secure points, which is obviously what they're there to do. But when you've got Liam Lawson driving 3, 4, 5 seconds a lap off the pace, just to build Hadjar like a 30-second gap so he can pit into and come out in clean air, and then as soon as he comes out, Liam starts driving really slowly again to get his second pit stop out of the way. This is definitely not what Formula 1 intended when they introduced this mandatory two-stop. And then Williams took it one step further, having Carlos back the pack up for Alex to get his 2 stops, and because they were running next to each other on the circuit, they could just swap the cars and then Alex would back up the pack so that Carlos could get his 2 stops out of the way. This is not what Formula 1 is. Formula 1 shouldn't be driving 5 seconds a lap slower. So instead of these really exciting mixed up strategies that the FIA were hoping for, we got cars driving around slower than Formula 3 cars and braking so early they were almost hitting into the back of each other, or in Pierre Gasly's case, doing exactly that. And then you've got Mercedes, who were just goal hanging for a safety car, which ultimately never came, and George Russell resorted to just cutting the Nouvelle chicane completely just to avoid being stuck in traffic, immediately coming on the radio to say, I'd rather take the 5 seconds. And obviously the FIA didn't look too kindly on this and slapped him with a drive-through penalty, but because Alex was driving so slow, even after George completed his drive-through, he was still ahead of Alex Albon on the track, which is just insane. But I completely understand George Russell's reasoning here. Why would I lose 5 seconds stuck behind a car when I can just overtake them off the track and then build a 20, 30, 40 second gap? But the way that the Williams and the V car were driving was just a joke. But we can't blame Alex or any of the other drivers here. James Vowles said it himself after the race. This is not how we want to go racing, and even texted Toto Wolff after the race to apologise for what he had done. Also, Alex took George out for dinner and paid for it, which I thought was quite funny. Just a quick reminder, I am doing a Formula 1 cap giveaway when I hit 1,500 subscribers, which we are so close to getting. So if you're not subscribed, make sure that you are to enter the competition. All you need to do to enter is make sure you subscribe to the channel and put a comment with your favourite team so I know which cap to send out if you win. But the big question is, what can we do about Monaco? Well, I've got a few ideas. Some of them are maybe a bit more reasonable than others, but we're going to go through a couple here. The first option is just to leave it exactly how it is and not try and change Monaco to make it more exciting. I completely understand why some people wouldn't enjoy that, but what makes Monaco exciting, to me at least, is the qualifying. It's so good to see the cars out there on a Saturday afternoon. I've never attended the Monaco Grand Prix, but it's one of my bucket list races. I would love to see the cars go through that circuit. But for the fans watching at home on TV, particularly on a Sunday, it is one of the most difficult races to watch. Even though Monaco is pretty much impossible to overtake on, if the driver in the lead makes the slightest mistake, it's game over. So while it is still quite boring, you truly never know who's going to win the Monaco Grand Prix until the final lap. I mean, you could be leading from lights to flag, come out of one corner, hit your rear tyre into the barrier, get a puncture and you're out. Whereas at most circuits, if you made a mistake, you just dip a wheel in the gravel or you run wide a bit and then just recover and you're fine. But if we do leave Monaco how it is, I think the FIA should introduce a similar rule to the 107% rule in qualifying. So this would stop the cars from just driving 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds a lap slower than the leaders. This may be a bit difficult to enforce. I don't know how you'd decide exactly what delta time the drivers need to drive to. But basically, if you're driving like 5 seconds a lap slower than the leaders, you'd get a warning and then maybe a penalty. Unless your car is just that slow, like the 2019 Williams, for example. But I think one of the easiest things to do would just be to remove the Nouvelle chicane completely. We see this lap after lap. Cars following coming out of the tunnel are just a little bit too far back to make a move going into the chicane. And even when you are close enough to make a move, it's so easy for the car in front to stay ahead. If the attacking car is on the inside, just cut the corner, claim you're forced off, which means you stay ahead. Or if the attacking car's on the outside, push them wide, they overtake off the track, have to give you the position back, in which case you again stay ahead. We see this every single year. But if you were to remove the chicane completely, or perhaps move it a bit further down, I have also seen that idea, you could then add an extra DRS zone. I don't think having DRS in the tunnel would be a particularly good idea because it is still quite curved. There are some safety concerns with that. I think we saw a few years ago Perez had a really nasty crash in the tunnel when you did have DRS there. So maybe DRS would activate as soon as you come out of the tunnel, and then that would lead all the way up to, I think it's Tabak turn 12. Also, I think what we should do is make Tabak a bit more of a 90-degree corner, so it's a harder braking zone, so you actually could get an overtaking move done on the brakes going into that corner. You'd maybe have to add some curbs onto the inside of the corner to make it a bit more of a 90-degree rather than a bit sweeping corner that it is currently. You could also look at reprofiling the Rascas. I've seen some people saying this, but I still don't think it would do enough. All you'd really be able to do is widen it a little bit to make it so that two cars can kind of go side by side there, but I don't think that coming out of the chicane before that, you'd build up enough speed to really get side by side going through there. And honestly, I think you'd have more cars just ending up in the wall in the Rascas than anything else. Now let's talk a bit more about some less serious ideas. George Russell had an interesting idea of having Saturday qualifying stay the same and then have just another qualifying session on the Sunday and then award points for qualifying. But I think he was just mad that he was stuck behind Alex, so he doesn't want to race there anymore. Something that I would quite like to see would just be having Monaco as an exhibition race and having no championship points awarded. Sort of like what IndyCar would do with their thermal race, where you just have a cash prize for the winning driver. You could put all the F1 drivers in a spec car like a Formula 3 car, for example. The F3 cars were a little bit smaller and maybe would be easier to overtake. Plus that way we'd get to see all the drivers in an equal car. We could then even see a drive like Bortoletto winning the race or Hadjar winning the race. Plus these cars are much smaller, so you maybe would be able to overtake. The F2 and the F3 races this weekend, there was a decent amount of overtaking there, not a huge amount, but still more than F1. But I do understand why a lot of fans wouldn't like that idea. I'm just sort of spitballing here. It's not a very Formula 1 friendly idea, and I'm sure a lot of people just wouldn't tune in for that. But Monaco's a really interesting race to me. It seems to be the one that the drivers all want to win, but no one seems to really enjoy racing there, apart from whoever wins the race, obviously. But when you listen to the post-race interviews, all the drivers just seem really sick of it. And I think the unfortunate truth is that Formula 1 has just outgrown Monaco years ago, and it's just not really feasible there. I definitely don't think that we should stop racing at Monaco, though. I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with the circuit. As I said earlier, the Saturday is the best thing ever, but then the Sunday always leaves you wanting more. But maybe there's one last option that we've got. This might sound a bit crazy, but hear me out. On lap 23 of the Monaco Grand Prix this weekend, a spectator threw what we believe to be a banana peel at Lando Norris's McLaren. And this got me thinking, the way that we spice up Monaco is adding little boxes around the circuit. You'd have to make them like rainbow coloured or something so the drivers can really see them when they're driving the cars. And then inside the boxes you'd have items and tools that the drivers can use to slow down the other drivers. Things like banana peels or like turtle shells, for example. Or if you're at the back of the grid, you get like a gold star that makes you really quick for a couple of laps. I mean, how much better would it have been if Lando Norris just chucked a banana peel at the back of his car, then sent Charles spinning into the barriers? I really don't know where this idea came from. I was just sort of thinking in bed, like, how can we make Monaco better? And this idea just sort of came to me. I can't believe it's not been done before. Please don't sue me, Nintendo.